So Colby, thank you so much for doing this interview. I appreciate you taking the time out to do this. Thank
Sure.
you. All right. So we just got a series of questions we'd like to walk you through today. The first one is, if you don't mind sharing your struggles with your anxiety disorder, when it started, how it was affecting you, how long you were suffering from it, and what you were doing before you actually came to Anxiety Center.
So, I believe that my anxiety disorder started a long time ago, but it really ended up manifesting itself into, I guess, what you'd call a disorder in 2015, the fall of 2015. I can almost remember it. It was October. But I do believe that prior to that is that it was there. I didn't recognize it. I believe I was having some of the physical symptoms, but, I just kind of didn't really acknowledge what they were until, like I said, in 2015. And you had, through Anxiety Center, I like the analogy of everybody has a cup, a stress cup.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe in 2015, and I believe I have a massive, I would think I have a stress bucket with what I have going on in my life, what I had going on in my life up to the point when the bucket finally overflowed. And then that's when the physical symptoms came. And then, being an anxious person, my number one struggles with health anxieties, which is kind of crazy because I'm a fairly healthy individual. And then once the physical symptoms started, it was like pouring gas in the fire, because then I took it as, hey, there's really something wrong with my health here. And it went from there, from bad to worse, really.
Okay. What were some of the things that you tried to do before you came to Anxiety Center?
All right. So, once I started having the physical symptoms, which for me, it started out with really muscle twitching.
Okay.
Um, a lot of that severe muscle twitching is what I started realizing, like, hey, what is this? So, of course, I went down the fear trail of, oh, I got MS, I got ALS, I got this, I got that. So, of course, I went right to Dr. Google
Oh, yeah.
about muscle twitches and what have you.
Yeah.
And that was absolutely the wrong thing to do. In life, if there was hindsight's 2020, that was bad.
Yeah.
Then my wife, because we didn't know what this was, and so my wife said, "Oh, hey, go see our family doctor. You got anxiety, go see your family doctor." And she works in the healthcare field, but she's had zero training in anxiety, and so of course I go and see my doctor. He essentially listened to me and instantly wanted to prescribe me medicine.
Mhm.
So when I went there, I went in there anxious, and he said, here's this prescription for, and I believe it was like a form of Xanax. Um, but he said to me, he says, well, if you're anxious about health, he said, don't read the symptoms, don't read the warning label or what have you.
Oh,
And I'm like, well, that's weird. So I went and I got the prescription filled, and of course I came home. And I will be honest, is I don't drink the Kool-Aid. I'm not a mindless robot. And so I'm like, well, hey, I really do care about my health. And so I did read the warning signs of what he had prescribed me. And of course I'm like, well, I'm not suicidal right now, And I took it, and the best move I ever made in my life is I walked right to the toilet and I flushed it.
mm,
And from there, I just tried to cope and deal with it for at least a year, going to the internet, trying to find answers, trying to understand what was going on, absolutely putting myself into a massive state of hyperstimulation through the fears and all those things, until ultimately, I think it was in the first year, probably maybe 2 years, that I ended up finding the Anxiety Center, which was like God's prayers answered. To be honest with you, it was when I found that resource, finally, I was like, well, that's what I got. That's how I feel. That's what it is. And it was just like, seeing things for the first time.
awesome. You mentioned muscle twitching. Were there other symptoms that you experienced, and which were the ones that bothered you the most?
So it started, like I said, it presented as muscle twitching. Okay, it started as muscle twitching, if I recall, it started like in my arms and stuff. And then it was pretty much, I'll be honest, all over. And then the more anxious I got and the more hyperstimulated I got, I started getting severe ringing in my ears, especially when I was real anxious. And that it still presents to this day.
Mm.
I'm not 100% recovered, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but The symptoms, then they started to present themselves, and probably one of the, I started getting bizarre thoughts. That was troubling, I'll be
Yeah.
honest. Um, Muscle twitching, muscle cramping. A lot of it was just muscular, physical, muscular. I did have the pounding heart. That scared the crap out of me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, pounding, trying to lay down at the end of the day and just, you can just hear your heart, boom,
Mm-hmm.
boom, and then of course that led me down the bigger fear trail that, hey, I've got something wrong, cardiovascular wise.
Right.
And
Would,
that that has consistently been my biggest challenge to overcome, is that I had never had any issues with blood pressure or my heart or anything like that. I personally believe my heart is extremely strong based on my physical fitness level. But in my mind, I really manifested that pounding heart really scared me,
yeah.
and it drove me right down that fear trail. And that's still been one of my bigger challenges.
Would you mind sharing a little bit about your phobia around blood pressure and how you
Yeah,
try to resolve that?
so once again, as I look back, it's self-inflicted. I'll tell you, is so when I first went to the doctor for to see the doctor, is I went in there anxious, scared that something was really wrong with me. Well, as soon as you're anxious, right, your blood pressure is going to go up. It's going to follow your anxiety. You start dumping those stress hormones. Well, your body's natural response is, hey, there's something going on here, the fight or flight, and
Yeah.
we're going to raise this guy's blood pressure. So I started seeing that in the doctor. So then, of course, when you're a doctor, then they look at you and say, oh my gosh, your blood pressure is elevated, and then it scares you even more. And then probably one of the worst things that happened to me was I got one of those uh, home blood pressure machines, which then I started going crazy with it, running down and taking my blood pressure. It was I had it down in my basement, and I would get myself all worked up about it because, and what we'll probably end up getting to is um, my underlying factor is really control, in my personality. And so I could not control that blood pressure. I wanted to go down every time and see on that machine a perfect number. And if it wasn't
Yeah.
under if it wasn't under 120 over 80, then in my mind something's seriously wrong with me. Well, then my idea was, I'll keep taking it. Like, I'm going to keep taking it until it comes down. But that just turned out to be an effort and futility, because I just kept getting myself more and more worked up, and I would dump stress hormones into my body. Well, guess what? Then you kind of get to a point where you were stressed out and that blood pressure wasn't going to come down. Um, so I can kind of look at it and laugh right now, because I've accepted what it is, through my work, um, my recovery work. There's
Right.
still there's still triggers that happen. I'll tell
Sure.
you right now, if my feelings right now about having my blood pressure taken are not good.
Mm-hmm.
And, I imagine right now, if I went to take my blood pressure, if I went to the clinic, there's still anxiety around it. But at least now through my work, I understand what it is, and I understand. Yup, it's going to be elevated. You're freaking out.
Good. Okay. Awesome. And what motivated you to eventually try Anxiety Center? Can you share a little bit about when you found it, what you discovered, and what motivated you to sort of take that extra step to work with a therapist?
Yeah. So, like I said, it was prayers answered when I did find, the Anxiety Center website. And once I opened it up, and then number one, I started out with symptoms. And once I started reading through symptoms, it was like reading my biography.
Wow.
It was like, I'm going down through it and I'm reading, and then the education level that Jim and Marilyn put into that website, you can't get that anywhere online. You can't, because guess what? I was the guy out there looking for it. And once I found it, number one, the reassuring thing is okay, I'm not alone. Number two, I'm not going crazy, because that crosses your mind. And it's kind of funny is that people talk about anxiety, and I believe depression as well, as this mental disorder. Well, that is how I felt. And I had been such a, where I'd been in my life, I'm squared away. I mean, this happening to me, I never saw it happening.
Hmm.
People that know me would have never thought this is it. Colby's the guy that's got his act together. You know what I mean? Great career, great family, absolutely have excelled in a lot of areas of my life. Blessed, you know. But then once I got to the Anxiety Center website. And then I started listening to some of Jim's podcasts, and I'm listening to these people, and I'm like, that's me. That's me. I was listening to the podcast he had and what have you, or the Skype calls. Excuse me, the Skype calls, I believe is what you call it.
Yep. Skype Live.
So then I did the old self-help for probably another year and a half, except for I was never getting to my underlying root. I was trying to fix myself by control, back to my root of what's wrong with me, or not what's wrong with me, but, where this all came from is underlying requirements of control. And so I finally got to the point is I had a good spell. So through this basically 3 to 4 year thing, I had good spells. I wasn't just always anxious. I would have good spells, but then it would come back. I was like, there was a couple times I'm like, oh, I'm healed. My mind's on other things. Life's going good. And all of a sudden something would happen, a trigger would happen, and I would go right back down to where I was, which is, amazing how you can do that. But the amygdala is something else. That's for sure.
Yeah, it absolutely is. So in your view, how would you say Anxiety Center differs from other supports out there on the internet?
There's nothing that rivals it.
Okay.
There's nothing right from, and I believe is even before you start working with a therapist, you have to understand, you have to take it in upon yourself to find out what is going on with me. Why is my body responding like this? Our body, now I know, is my body was doing exactly what it was supposed to do. It was absolutely, I was worrying and fretting and fears, and my body, I could feel my body. Like if I went to take my blood pressure, or if I had something like that going on, I could feel everything in my body tighten right up. Yeah, I could tighten right up.
Right.
It was crazy how I would go into that protective mode. I could feel that going on, but when I read all that information on the website and I just educated myself, I sat here, I forget how many sections there are, 15 some. I sat and read it and studied it and went back because I wanted to figure out physiologically what the heck is going on with my body. And then the weirdest thing is once I still knew, this is how strong the amygdala is I knew what was going on with me physically, my body's response. I was struggling to shut it off, to figure out how to calm myself down. That's where I was still having my struggles. And so I had a nice period of where things were decent. I'm not saying perfect. And then I had a pretty significant, right back down the fear trail, and I forget what it even was. And at that point, I'd been listening to a lot of Jim's Skype calls, and I made the decision. I said, I need help, which, as I spoke earlier, I'm just not that guy. Like, I'm trying to fix things. I'm a fixer, engineering type background. I can fix cars, build houses. I can do all these things. And that's half my problem. It's a control thing.
Right.
And finally, I just said, I can't, I need help. I can't do this on my own. And so that's when I ended up looking into the coaches at Anxiety Center. And then what I did is I tried looking, because there was like biographies on you folks, and I tried pairing up with somebody who had a similar situation as myself, which you have. And, from there is when I sought out to start a relationship with you.
Excellent. So that's great. So obviously you were, on the Anxiety Center as a member and reading the information and gathering it. And then you transitioned into working with a therapist. Could you describe your therapeutic experience? What was helpful about it? If you've had previous therapeutic experience, how it may differ? Really, what was it about the therapeutic journey that helped you sort of get to where you are now?
Yeah. So my history with therapy is about none. The only experience I had was going to my family practitioner, who basically I knew more about anxiety than him. And so, and that's no slight to him, because I will tell you, my sister-in-law is actually a physician.
Mm-hmm.
If there's people watching this, if they're watching this segment, is what I want you to realize is your family doctor has no clue about anxiety. I believe, and I don't want to cast a broad net, but I believe most of them are trained to write your prescription.
Right.
There's no way. And so my experience was going to my family doctor, and like I said, he had no clue. He's just like, oh yeah, here, you're anxious, I'm going to prescribe you a pill. And when I sat down and talked to my sister-in-law, who's also a physician, I sat down and talked to her and I said, hey, I said, she went to a pretty prestigious medical school and stuff. I mean, she's a legit doctor. I'm like, what kind of training did you ever get on anxiety? And she basically said, none.
So
Zero.
let me stop you for just a sec, because this is interesting. So having your sister-in-law, you said sister-in-law,
Yep.
as a medical doctor, have you had conversations with her during this journey for yourself? And I'm just curious, what the dynamics of those conversations have been like, and has she learned some things from you? I'm just curious what those conversations have been like for you.
So when I started out, there was, and I'm pretty close to my sister-in-law. I mean, I trust her, I love her, and I went to her basically as part of my fact finding. Hey, what the heck's going on here?
Sure.
What's kind of funny is that, her first inkling was lorazepam.
Right.
Her first inkling was, well, hey, when you're feeling like that, just take something to take the edge off. And then when I ended up sitting down with her, I was a fair bit into this, and on my way towards recovery is when I really sat down and had the conversation with her one-on-one. I'm like, listen, I just want to ask, about what your training was in this and what have you. And to be honest, I took the opportunity to sit and educate her for about an hour on my back patio. And then I directed her to the Anxiety Center website. And I said, listen, as a physician, you need to go, because right now, and I see it, Stacey, it's hard to find anybody walking around the face of this earth right now with the world is that doesn't have some form of anxiety or stress or depression.
Yeah.
And that's a true statement. And you know what? I never paid attention to it until I started going through the struggle. And the good news for me is that I've been able to help people. I've sent so many people to the Anxiety Center website just in conversation. And what it's allowed me to do is really to set my pride aside and not be big, bad, tough Colby, and really like, hey, listen, this is real. It sucks. And there's help. And there's recovery.
So how did your sister respond to your educational hour?
So I had her on the edge of her seat listening.
Yeah.
Outside. So she basically knew about fight or flight.
Sure.
I will say she knew about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. I believe she knew about fight or flight, but I don't think she had a clue about the number of people that probably comes into her practice struggling with anxiety and stuff like that, and understanding that their body is hyperstimulated. She had no clue what the meaning of hype. She had no clue about hyperstimulation.
Wow.
And I started educating her, about that stuff, and she's very receptive. I mean, she's a smart.
In my experience, that's been my experience with working with doctors as clients, is that they have the educational background on the biology of what's going on. They just don't connect the dots between the biology and the condition. They look at it through that medical lens. And I do think it's important for both of us to admit and declare that the medical field, majority of them are all very well intended, and they're doing the best work that they can, but their education doesn't allow them to make that connection. But once they do, here's my experience. Once they make that connection, it's eye-opening for them. It's like, wow, it's amazing to them. So that's good. Well, let's just go back to your therapeutic experience. Sorry, I took a little segue there because I didn't know about your sister.
So the other thing was, so I actually was not satisfied with my primary care physician here.
Right.
And his first response to put me on meds. So I ended up about a year later saying, you know what, we changed doctors strictly because of, I just didn't feel like maybe I got the attention, or so I went to another doctor, once again, another family practitioner. And full disclosure, I just told her, hey, listen, I struggle with this stuff, and right away wanted to give me lorazepam. First thing was, and they, I believe the way that they said to me was, this is just a little security blanket for you that you can have for when you start feeling anxious. Just pop a couple. And I'm like, no, I'm nope, I'm not interested in that. And then the only other advice that was given to me was watch your sugar, watch how much sugar you ingest, is I believe what they said. which sugar's a stimulant. So
Sure.
so I would say they kind of had a slight idea that, obviously if you're struggling with anxiety, you shouldn't be drinking a bunch of coffee, eating a bunch of stimulants, right? Because that does not help.
Right.
So that was if there was a little tidbit of advice, that was what I got out of the next person. And then from there was very shortly after that is when I sought out therapy with you.
Right. And how has that experience been for you? What has helped you about the journey of therapy?
Yep. So the good news is that I wanted it. By the time that I ended up setting up the appointments, I had surrendered because nothing else. I knew I could not. I couldn't get over the hump. Even as much reading as I did and everything that I was trying to do, and I was trying meditation. I mean, I was doing all the things that basically Jim directs you to. Because there's a self-help section in the Anxiety Center website, which is very valuable. But then once I got to working with you, is right away is that you were like, wanted to understand what I was going through, number one, which was good. You're like, all right, what's going on with this guy? And then when you did that personality, I think that's what you do, is a personality analysis of me or whatever.
A questionnaire.
The questionnaire. I mean, I'm that guy, right? I'm that type O personality. I'm driven. I'm the guy going crazy at the gym. I'm the guy who, when he plays sports, is very competitive. I am a perfectionist. If I'm going to do something, it's perfect, Well, obviously that is, so obviously that goes towards, a person that can develop some anxiety or whatever, just based on that. So you helped me understand who I was and what was going on right out of the gate. And you know what? It's funny when you pretty much, like, after we did the analysis, you pretty much told me who I was as a person. It was like prophetic, but you work with a lot of people. So you know what? I guarantee when you saw Colby come through the door on the screen, you were like, yep, I know the type, which is fair.
Well, what's amazing though is that the assessment tool that we use gives us that direction very clearly. So it's, the years that we work with clients informs us, but that questionnaire, because of the way you answered the statements, the questions, gives us it's I always say to people, it's like a verbal Polaroid of a person's lifestyle. And so that's, like, I want to give a lot of credit to the questionnaire itself, because I think facilitating that questionnaire is key to understanding not only the client's core characteristics, but also how much of a condition they're actually dealing with. Let me ask you this. What has been your greatest therapeutic challenge to date?
So, when we first started working, we identified what some of my fears were. And, it was weird is that probably the biggest challenge to date is setting my pride aside, recognizing that I had these behavioral issues, and acknowledging them, and not trying to control them. And so, for example, on that, the best thing is we went through the containment worksheet.
Right.
And we went through a couple of my fear triggers,
right,
or whatever. We went through it. And so, you kind of go through this exercise. And so, it's right there in front of you. And then you have the cognitive, the
distortion list.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I'm reading it, it reads like a horror story of my life, which I know is true. But, your mind is, you've got to get to the point where you accept it, right? You have to accept it. And then what my biggest challenge is that I was kind of doing this, like, I was taking this engineering approach, systematic approach to fixing myself. And so, I would have some anxiety flare up where I'd go down the fear trail and I would pull up my sheet like I was baking a pan of brownies. Do this, stop this, think this, do that. I was like, it's like I was going through the the fear extinguishing thing, but I was doing it like a rule-based type thing.
Right.
When you really have to surrender and acknowledge and understand why you feel that way, and understand it's okay to feel that way, and accept it. It was the acceptance portion, I believe, was one of my challenges. The control and acceptance issues,
Right. So that's interesting that you mentioned the control and acceptance part. So that sort of leans in on the issue of expectations, right? So you mentioned that as an engineer, usually engineers have been taught, well, if A plus B equals C, it should
Right.
happen all the time, right? So that's sort of engineering mindset. So you would have had to reframe that cognition in a different way. So how has your expectations uh, of how you apply strategies like containment, have your expectations shifted?
Yes, is that what I've been able to do through working and identifying some of these core issues is that I recognize now that I'll use blood pressure as an example.
Okay,
If if I have my blood pressure taken and I know I'm already amped up or
right.
I'm anxious and it comes in high, well, I should be going, duh, it's high because you're all stressed out. When in all reality, when I'm just sitting here in a calm
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
I'm just sitting here in a calm, relaxed state, is that I know my blood pressure's very good, because I have been able to calm myself down and sit and take my blood pressure, and it's actually exceptional for a 47-year-old man. And I know what my resting pulse rate is, which is one of the things you helped me work through, is because when I'm all anxious and I'm taking my blood pressure and it's screaming high, well, my heart's just hammering 90 beats per minute, heartbeats per minute, but if I'm just sitting here right now, my resting heart rate's like 44.
Wow, I'm
So,
jealous.
and I'm not trying to say that. I'm saying once you learn that is so okay, yes, my blood pressure's high because I'm anxious because I'm having my blood pressure taken, but that doesn't mean that's how it is all the time. And
Right.
so you working with you allowed me to reframe that to say, it's okay. You know what? If a lion came bursting through my door right now, I bet my blood pressure is going to come up, you know? And that's where, because you have that fear. Well, I have this fear of medical stuff, and it's silly. And it kind of comes back from my childhood, which you helped me kind of work back to figure out where some of those core fears came from.
Right. So I want to just unpack this a little bit more. So for the client who's listening to this, watching this, who's thinking, well, okay, I'm going to go to anxiety center and I'm going to learn about anxiety and I'm going to learn about the different strategies. If they think that by applying these strategies that they're going to get immediate results from that, or there's going to be an immediate outcome of some kind, what would you say to them?
I will tell you is that recovery from anxiety, there's no easy button. It's not going to happen overnight. Is even myself, I consider myself fairly intelligent, and I knew everything that was going on in my body. I knew it was happening, but I couldn't control it. And so the person that thinks that they're going to have one or two counseling sessions and walk away, they're fooling themselves.
Or even
Is
6 or 10, right?
Oh yeah, I can tell you right now is that you can't put a. Here's one thing: you cannot put a timeline on it.
Right.
You can put a timeline, and like I said, I still have my moments. I'm a different person now than what I was.
Mm-hmm.
And but what I would tell the person that's watching this about talking to a coach, you pulled me out of my comfort zone and you exposed my soft underbelly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, hey, this is why you can't make these next steps. It's because you still want to control it. You don't want to accept it. You don't want to be uncomfortable with it. And there's some things that are just out of our control. And if you're a control freak,
Mm-hmm.
you know, guess what? That's why I have anxiety because I always want to control every situation. But guess what? Now I'm to the point, like whether it's at work or it's at home or even if it's with my health, well, I can't control that. If God calls me home tomorrow, I can't control that.
So what's that been like for you to let go of that type of control that you're describing?
Yeah. So I would say if you were to talk to my loved ones who live with me forever, and I don't know if people like coworkers or acquaintances recognize the difference, maybe, but they're not around me all the time. But I'm a different person. I'm an absolutely different person.
But
Is I
a healthier person.
Yeah, I approach things differently.
Yeah.
I was the guy that, and I still get some of that. I talked fast. I walked fast. I ate fast. I did everything with a purpose and all that. I was in a hurry to get to the next thing, to work on that and to defeat that and to be, all those driven things is that I am a different person. Do I still have that flame in me that can be that person? Absolutely. But when I get back in that mode, I can instantly tell, and I start having uh, physical symptoms.
Right.
I know when I've had a day when I've been revved up. I know when I'm in a situation where I'm getting anxious. I can totally tell. And the good news is, through my recovery, is I identify what it is. It doesn't scare me anymore. I'm like, oh crap, I got myself worked up. Got to slow down.
And that wasn't an easy process for you to get to, was it?
No, not at all. That if there's one thing is, I think that maybe you're even one. Recovery is a practice.
Mm-hmm.
It is a long road. So no different. If I want to go out and do something, you know, I'm an avid outdoorsman. If I want to go out and shoot my bow well, I need to practice. That's a daily practice. I can't just go and pull it out of the garage in the fall and blow some dust off it and go out and succeed. So it is a practice. It's a daily practice.
So what would you rate your present percentage of recovery at this point on a scale of 0 to 100?
I would say I'm 80%. I would say I'm solidly 80% recovered.
Okay. What do you think it's going to take for you to get? So I'm always hesitant to say 100% because 100% sounds like you're never going to be anxious or stressed ever in your life, which is ridiculous, right?
Yep.
So, I know I have maybe a different view. 100% recovery doesn't mean, you know, zero symptoms or zero sensations.
Right.
What would it look like for you to, you know, get closer to that 100% for you? What is it that you still need to work on, you think?
I think I'm still in your camp. As far as, I don't know if there is such a thing as 100% recovery. I know that Jim talks about that sometimes, and I don't know if all of a sudden life just becomes a bowl of, you know, you're walking through the daisies every day or not. That's great if some people can.
Well, I think, let me just say this. I think 100% recovery is achievable. It depends on how we define 100% recovery,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right? Because I'm
Yeah.
100% recovered,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean that I don't have symptoms or sensations if I overdo things, right?
Absolutely. And then that's where I'm sitting at. When I say 80%, it's because I still have those moments. So I would say the last straw hurdle that I'm working towards, and I say working towards, and I don't know how long that takes, to be honest with you, because I don't think you can put a timeline on it, is trust. It's trusting my recovery. It's trusting myself. It's having that confidence that when I do have a situation that
Right.
can be anxious to me, is that I'm able to basically deal with it right then, not get anxious about it, accept it. You know, I would say that's the last. It's like that last year. You know, I almost feel like, hey, I'm right there. You know, I keep telling myself, man, I'm right there, and then I'll have a regression.
Right.
But my regressions now are like 15 minutes, half an hour, not these days where I'm in my head going, oh my gosh, you're gonna die, you're gonna have a heart attack, your blood pressure, you know, you got ALS, you got you got MS, you got, oh, you got this tingling in your toe. What the heck is that? You know, you got a bellyache. Is that stomach cancer? You know, now I'm just kind of like, you know, hey, um, we're not guaranteed another day. And so I think once I kind of, you know, that was another one of my underlying um, factors. I don't know that I was so scared. I don't know if it was fear of death or just that control thing again, you know, because I am a Christian. I'm saved. I know where I'm going. I'm good to go.
Right.
You know, I think some of the times I'd like to stick around a little longer for my kids and grandkids potentially, but I can't control that. And that is a big one, trusting that I can't control it. And so don't worry about it.
Good. So, if someone were considering working with an anxiety center therapist but are hesitant, what would your advice be for them?
But do it, hands down. I floundered around. Take it from me. I floundered around my own for 3 years. You know, my gosh. And then those behaviors get so ingrained in you, then it becomes part of you. That is so much harder. That is so much harder to 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 work and you know, resolve that. You know, it's kind of like a fish hook, right? It's just sticking your skin. Don't bury it, you know, because then you're going to have a hard time pulling it out.
You definitely sound like a hunter and fisher person.
Yeah. That's the analogy I can use is don't let that hook get in you.
Don't let it fester, right? Okay, good. So, you know, I want to give you an opportunity right now to conclude our time together here to just share directly with people who are watching this video. You've shared your story. I want to thank you for sharing your journey. Of course, you know, it's hard to put a lot of the effort and work you've put into recovery into this small, short video, even after 39 minutes of talking. But if you were going to speak directly to clients who are watching this video, what do you want them to know about this journey you've been on? What is that important thing you would like to pass on to them as they consider this the next step in their journey?
Yeah. So number one is what I want people to realize is, and it was really beneficial for me, is that you you don't have mental illness. And that was a huge deal for me because that's what it's, I mean, you know, anxiety and depression, you know, and I'm sure there is some of it that is mental illness, you know, but the general person like myself who was reasonably healthy and then all of a sudden has, you know, struggles with anxiety or stress and anxiety, is that it was really brought on by my behaviors. And so what I want to tell people would be is, as much as I have not liked the last 3 to 4 years of my life living like this and working through this, is that I don't think I would change a thing, because ultimately it ended up making me a different, better person. And it has slowed me down. I've enjoyed life even more so. And it's drawn me closer to my family and also to God through the whole walk. And if you that the Anxiety Center website will give you all the information you need to understand what's going on with you. But then if you, I'm sure some people can do self-help. I think that some people could go to the Anxiety Center website. Maybe I could have 4 years ago and read it and said, oh, you got yourself all stressed out and this is what you need to do to calm down. And maybe I don't go down this fear trail forever. Um, but if you need that help, don't hesitate to reach out to a coach, because it's not a dirty thing. You know, you think about therapy and you're sitting on a couch and there's some shrink talking to you or whatever. That isn't what this experience was at all. This was somebody that was getting to know me as a person and to understand what I was going through. And we laughed, we joked. It was pretty light-hearted. Um, it made me feel comfortable, because sometimes you say, "Hey, I'm talking to a therapist," and you know, like once again, I was able to set my pride aside. I've told people, hey, I'm talking to an anxiety coach, because I couldn't figure it out, because I did not want to take medicine. I did not want to take pills, because I knew that was not the answer. That's putting a Band-Aid on a bigger problem. And I don't even think that those medicines help you anyways, you know, because I know people that are struggling with anxiety and they're taking the medicine and they aren't doing as good as me, you know, hands. And I will be honest, is through the experience I've had with the Anxiety Center, is I've actually referred people. I I've referred at least a dozen people to the website to go get information. And then I have directly referred several people to coaches at the Anxiety Center. And the feedback that I'm getting from them is they're on their way as well. You know, they're going through the process of recovery.
Right.
So that's what it's been a blessing. Hands down, it's been a blessing.
Well, Colby, I just want to, first of all, congratulate you on all the hard work that you have put in.
Yep.
Because, of course, you know, therapy is 10% therapist, 90% client. And you've done your work and you're still doing some work. And I think all of us who, including myself, who have recovered, are always working on underlying issues that we identify and need to work on them. And you know, the journey of growing is never complete. We're always
Right.
working, but you know, you're not afraid of your condition anymore. You have a plan, you have strategies to work through it. And you know, I know you said you're 80% recovered, but between you and me, I think you're a little higher than that. But you know, I understand why you say 80. You want to keep your expectations relatively low. But I just, again, I want to thank you for taking the time out today to talk with us and to share
I,
your story.
I
Yeah.
wanted to share with other people. I mean, I just want people, if whoever watches this, and I don't know, you know, why they would, or if God puts this in their plan. I want them to see my story is that it was life changing.
Well, here's the thing that people need to understand. You know, you're like that, what I call that typical alpha male muscle guy that likes to go out and hunt and fish and work hard and all this stuff. You know,
Yep.
if a condition can affect someone like you, it can affect anybody. But also,
Absolutely.
people need to understand that you can also get better,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
you're proof positive of that. So, again, I want to thank you so much for taking the opportunity to meet with us today. And I know that your story is going to have an impact on others out there.
Good.
Thanks, Colby.
Thank you.
Bye.